Let me just touch on a couple more thoughts on the time we have left, kind of going through this. This stuff, it's just not as testable. Of course, we want to make sure that we identify any alterations, try to identify material facts so we can disclose them. Talk about what we're going to do to market their property to get it sold, how much are we going to charge them. As Kirsten asked earlier, determine if a potential short sale situation exists, meaning we can't sell it for as much as they owe. That would be a short sale. And so we got to decide how we're going to tackle that, if that's even a listing we want to take on. Of course, one of our jobs too is potentially verifying square footage. Now, I'll introduce something, but we kind of talked about square footage a little bit already. And so I'm going to take a moment to just teach you this before I move on, because it'll show up later, but now's a good time because we're talking about it. When we're dealing with square footage, the calculations are just area calculations, right? Length times width. You measure a house, but there are criteria in North Carolina that you will need to know. In North Carolina, we utilize what we call the Commission's Residential Square Footage Guidelines. And you have access to this. And let me just show you where to find it as well. So under publications on the Real Estate Commission's website, guides, residential square footage guidelines. This is the criteria for what is considered heated living area in North Carolina. Okay. There are three main criteria for it to be considered heated living area. Emphasis on the word I keep saying, heated. And so the Real Estate Commission in North Carolina, I'm going to make a couple statements here. Square footage is not a material fact. However, when we relay it to the public, it has to be accurate. Well, the multiple listing service that we talked about requires us to relay it. So the commission doesn't require it. The multiple listing service does. And so because we are putting it out there, it does have to be accurate. So we as licensees in North Carolina are expected to have the ability to measure a house. Don't worry, we teach you what that looks like in post-licensing. And then you practice it as you go along. But there are three very testable criteria for what is considered living area in North Carolina. First one is heated. I kept saying that, heated. It has to have a permanent heat source. You cannot count a fireplace. Portable heaters don't count. So it says heated by conventional heating system or systems, forced air, radiant, solar, etc., that are permanently installed in the dwelling. Not a portable heater or fireplace, which generates heat sufficient to make the space suitable for year-round occupancy. So there's criteria number one. Has to have a permanent heat source. What you got, Jacob?
So does that mean like a home that doesn't have any heating or cooling or anything like that in it is technically 0 square feet?
There you go. You could have a 3,000 square foot building, but if it has no heat source in it, it's a 0 square foot building.
What about, okay, for example, my dad.
No, don't go down too many rabbit holes. We got to keep moving.
Well, just quick question.
Okay, quick.
My dad, he has, in his garage, they have one of those heaters that goes up on the top. It heats and cools. It's air conditioning. Does
it have a garage door? Has a garage door?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Not heated square footage. Number two, Jacob, finished. Finished with walls, floors, ceilings of material generally accepted for interior construction. Painted drywall, sheetrock, paneled floors, carpeted or hardwood flooring. Your dad's slab floors in his garage and that garage door are not standard finishes as the rest of the living area. So you cannot count it. Even though it may have a portable or a permanent heat source, can't count it because it doesn't meet the rest of the criteria. So the other thing that kind of goes in this, there are height requirements. Ceilings have to have a minimum height of 7 feet from ground to ceiling to count. Now the exception to that is where there's duct work. It has to be at least 6 feet 4 inches from the ground for any like duct or piping running through. And then in rooms with sloped ceilings, like a finished room over a garage, you can only count those. Let's say that you had a room that kind of looked like this, these slopes. You can only count it as long as at least half of the room is at least 7 feet from floor to ceiling. And you can only count up to the space where these slopes are at least 5 feet from the floor. So if the slopes go all the way down to 4 feet, you can't count this space right here. So that's what that's saying. It has to be at least 5 feet from floor to ceiling in those slopes, and at least half the room has to be 7 feet tall in order to count it. But it has to be like finishes as the rest of the house. So that's why a garage won't count. Slab floors are not the same finishes. You know, unpainted drywall is not the same finish. A garage door is not the same finish. That's not insulated. It doesn't count. It doesn't meet the criteria. And then the last criteria is accessible from other heated living area. So let's just say that you had a bonus room over your garage that was finished, but the only way to access it was through your garage. Couldn't count it because you have to go outside of your house into your garage and then up to this space. What this means is you can't include it in the total living area. So when you see somebody advertise a 3,000 square foot house, that whole number, it couldn't be included in that. Could you say other living area or other area, what we call above grade? You could. Now let me explain that term I just used, above grade. When we're talking about grading, grading is where you go and you level out the dirt for construction. It's called grading. And so if you've got a property that looks something like this, kind of slopes back, and you build the house, and you go in the front door here, and the foundation kind of goes like this. And so you've got some living space down here that is basement. Well, anything that is above the dirt is called above grade living area. You can see that word right there, above grade. But if any wall has dirt on the outside of it, even a little bit, it is considered below grade. So let's say that you had stairs that led down to a finished and heated basement area in here. Because there is dirt on this exterior wall right here, it would be considered below grade. That is very testable. Above grade is built above the dirt. Below grade is anything that has even a little bit of dirt outside of one of the walls. Now, from an appraisal point of view, above grade square footage is worth more than below grade square footage. And you will absolutely see these terminologies on your test. What you got, Jacob?
So does below grade square footage count towards the overall square footage of your home or no?
Yes. Quick note here, and I don't know if you're going to get tested on this or not. There is actually two different standards of measuring houses. One is what we call the ANSI standard. It stands for the American National Standard Institute. That's what appraisers use. In North Carolina, we use this, the residential square footage guidelines. The residential square footage guidelines allows us to combine that number together to just call it total living area. However, it does suggest that if the MLS gives you an opportunity to disclose that part of that's below grade, it says you should. But that's actually what this is saying right here. If you read this little note, it basically says that we are allowed to consider it as total living area, but we should differentiate between the two just so there's no confusion in marketing.
So depending on whether or not this is, we get a question on something like this on the state or national portion would depend on our answer.
There you go. This very specifically, what I'm showing you right here, is based on our state criteria. And believe it or not, some states don't really care about square footage. If you buy houses in some states, they say, well, it's this many bedrooms, this many bathrooms. Don't worry about square footage. Do you like it or not? Yeah. What'd you say, Stephanie?
I said because I know, I can't remember what, my aunt lives, I don't remember, one of them ones up north. And that's how they do it, is just described by how many bedrooms and how many bathrooms. That's
exactly right. So it is a big component in North Carolina. We very commonly price things based on how many square feet it has in North Carolina. And we'll talk about that in the valuation section. What you got, Kirsten? You had a question.
Actually, I was looking for the definition of below grade, but then you pointed it out on the left, so I'm good.
Yep, there you go. Below grade is space on any level which has living area, is accessible by interior stairs, and has earth adjacent to any exterior wall on that level. Definitely testable. So if you live on a crawl space, for instance, you know, where you've got your brick crawl space and then houses all above, all of your space is above grade. If you've got a basement or, you know, a weird crawl space where there's some dirt over here, you know, then it would be below grade. But that is definitely testable. That being said, folks, it is